here. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's charity webinar. My name's Adam Croney, and I'm a director based in our Plymouth office. I'm pleased to be joined today by two fellow directors, Kat Williams and Tom Stuckey, both directors and both also within our specialist charities team. We've received lots of questions from you as part of your registration. We've logged each of these and we'll certainly endeavour to answer these over the next 30 minutes or so. If we don't get around to answering anything, then we've got a log of everything and we'll certainly follow up with you afterwards. Hopefully over the last couple of weeks, you've spent plenty of time on Zoom. It's certainly become something that I'm used to, and hopefully therefore you're familiar with the Q&A function. Please do ask questions as we go. The aim for us is certainly that you'll get as much out of this as possible. In terms of formats, I'm going to pass firstly over to Kat, who's going to spend a bit of time just talking through sort of key hot topics in terms of financial management, and then pass over to Tom to talk a bit about trustee responsibilities before we open it up for some Q&A. So over to you, Kat.
Thanks, Adam. Right, I'm just going to try and share my screen because I've got a PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully this will work as it did in practice. Yeah, it looks like it's working to me. Right, as you will all be aware, charities are not immune to the impact of the coronavirus. The impact on charities is dependent on the sector that you're involved in, your financial position before this crisis hit. I know that we've had quite a few questions on the grants and other support that's available to charities. I will cover some of the support, but I know Adam's going to cover in the questions in a bit about the additional grants and funding that will be available to charities. Although there may be additional funding available to charities, it's important that all charities look at their financial position at the moment and also review basically what they've got now, and just review it in line with the current restrictions. Obviously, earlier in the week, we got a little bit of clarity, depending on your opinion, on how we are going to move forward, what the future looks like. And for some charities, that might mean that they can get back a little bit more to normal. For some charities, it might be slightly further in the future. The key points to consider when you're reviewing your charity, in some ways, doesn't change from the day to day. You need to ensure that all decisions are in line with your governing documents. The requirement for that has not changed. And it won't change. The Charity Commission are quite clear on that. You do, however, have some additional considerations. You need to review whether you're better to focus your efforts on helping your beneficiaries now, which is a time that unknown for me, it's unknown for so many people. Are you better in helping your beneficiaries now, which may have a long-term impact on your charity, or are you better in cutting right back now, cutting back your costs so you can help your beneficiaries in the future? Whichever option you go for, you need to ensure that you're able to safeguard your users. Many charities may have investments or assets which they may realise that they need to sell in order to be able to continue. As we're all aware, the market has just dropped at the moment, and the prices that you may get for this are completely different to what you may have got 6 months ago. It may still be an appropriate decision to sell the assets. This would be completely fine, and within the charity rules, just need to ensure that you document it. It might also be that you need to take expert advice. If you have trustees that don't have this skill set, then in line with the Charity Commission guidance, you should be looking to take expert advice. without knowing the financial position of your charity, you don't know where you are, basically. I would expect and I would hope that everyone that's turned up for this webinar has already reviewed their financial position and also put some budgets in place. This may well be for several variables. There are so many unknowns, not only over the next few months, over the next year. This should identify any shortfalls. We have seen so many charities at the moment with shortfalls in income. Fundraising has either been postponed, cancelled. The one that springs to mind the most that I know a lot of charities get fundraising income from, the London Marathon. That's definitely postponed at the moment. Not my personal opinion. I don't know whether that will go ahead or not. There's restrictions on people's personal income. Donations are not coming through like they would normally do. However, on the flip side, I have seen some very innovative fundraising ideas. From Zoom quizzes, I saw something earlier about climbing, I think it was a mountain in your house and getting fundraising for it. So there definitely are new and innovative ideas for fundraising out there, but there are definitely shortfalls. Potentially, you may be able to contact fundraisers that have previously given funds to you. They should have a good understanding of your charity and hopefully agree and support your charity's purpose. They may be able to provide you with additional funding, or if they have previously provided you with restricted funding and due to the current restrictions you're not able to use this, it may be possible to get in touch with them and ask them to release or change the restrictions so you can use them. As I know most charities have been using over the last few weeks, there are also additional government assistance schemes. Some of them, which charities will have been entitled to, include the Small Business Grant Scheme. If you are entitled to the initial scheme, you should have received the money. However, earlier in the month, the government did announce that there were some additional funds that have been made available to local councils. The councils do have discretion on how to use these. There was some additional guidance announced last night to the councils. This should include certain businesses which were in receipt of charitable business rates relief. But this is based on the council's discretion and will vary from council to council. So if this is something that you may be eligible for, I'd check with your local council. Many charities have also been making use of the job retention scheme, which, as many of you will know, earlier in the week was extended to the end of October. It's going to continue as it is until the end of July. And then from August onwards, there will be some changes which will be announced later on in the month. But currently it's believed that this will include part-time employees coming back part-time and employers being asked to contribute towards the furlough pay. Once you've prepared your budget, make sure that you have obtained all funding and assistance available to you. As we're all aware, the position is just changing. It feels like daily sometimes. It's important to know what needs to happen, what the trigger points are for you to move on to the next stage. Depending on your charity, depending on how you interact with your beneficiaries, there may be many stages to this. It's just important that you know what needs to happen, whether this relates to restrictions being released, funding being received, or a whole range of other matters. Finally, before I hand back to Adam, although it does seem all doom and gloom at the moment, it may be that as a result of these changes that have been enforced on us, there are some positives. You may be able to identify some improvements to your systems or your operations that you can take forward. It might also be that you can identify a new area that your charity can assist, although you would obviously need to look at your articles and make sure it's in line with this. But there is definitely a lot of room for improvement that I think we can all take forward from this. Back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Kat. So if Kat's mentioned anything that as a sort of sparked a question, please do make use of that Q&A function that we've got. There was one question that we've received in advance, which I think you've picked up on in there, Kat, which was around that discretionary fund that's now been provided to local authorities. Interestingly, I was speaking to a couple of councillors earlier in the week who were saying, I think it's really important to recognise at this stage that whilst more money is coming out from central government, in the grand scheme of things, that the size of that discretionary pot is small, and therefore if you feel as if you've sort of missed out before and for one reason or another have been ineligible before, I'd certainly encourage you to get in touch with your local authority. Hand over to you, Tom, to talk through a bit about trustee responsibilities.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to bring up my PowerPoint as well. Hopefully everyone can see this. So this afternoon, I just want to cover trustees' responsibilities, really. Although coronavirus is preventing many board of trustees meeting as normal, it's important that trustees continue to fulfil their legal duties when it comes to managing their charities effectively. One way of overcoming this problem of not being able to meet face-to-face is using technology, and like me, probably many of you over the last few weeks have had to get to grips with programs such as Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, Microsoft Teams. And actually, they're really good tools which allow you to continue to have meetings and do the important functions that trustee boards should do. I have had a few trustees contact me over the last few weeks asking about the validity of these virtual meetings and whether they meet the legal requirements of a normal trustees meeting. The answer is generally yes, they will, but it does depend in some circumstances. The first thing that you perhaps should do is look at your governing documents for the charity. Now, if your governing documents have been written relatively recently, there might even be details in there about holding meetings virtually or using modern technology, virtual platforms, or telephone communication to hold meetings. If your governing documents don't do that, they may allow you to make amendments to your governing documents quite easily without jumping through hoops to do it, and therefore as trustees you could quickly amend your governing documents to allow those meetings to take place. Where there's no such clause in your governing documents, the Charity Commission has made it clear recently that they understand the situation and would allow you to have virtual meetings using technology, but you need to record your decision to do this, and so that you can demonstrate good governance of your charity. So that's the really important thing. So just to reiterate, if your governing documents are silent on the matter of virtual meetings, then any decisions you make sure you document them correctly so you can rely on it later on should the Charity Commission ever ask a question. The Charity Commission have also said recently that their approach to regulation during this corona virus outbreak period will be flexible and pragmatic and in the public interest, so that basically where you need help from a charity commission, it is open as normal. They may have some staffing issues, like perhaps many businesses do, and they may have a higher number of queries coming into at the moment, but they are trying to keep business as normal. They're prioritising their responses to charity questions, trying to deal with the most important ones or urgent ones first. But if you do have any issues, they are still there for you to call upon. One of the other things which I wanted to discuss was whether you should postpone meetings or not. So sometimes trustees are worried about whether they can carry on with their AGM at the planned date or whether they should postpone it. And also trying to meet annual reporting deadlines. Now, again, if for whatever reason you don't think you're going to be able to meet those deadlines, perhaps you can't have your AGM and therefore the accounts can't be signed, then you can actually ask for an extension. So you need to apply to a charity commission. I just bring up the next slide there. There's an email address, a special email address set up by the Charity Commission for you to contact if you need a filing extension for your accounts for COVID-19 related reasons. If I then move on to the next point. So it's important that as trustees you're responding to coronavirus in the best possible way. Part of this is clearly understanding the impact that coronavirus is having on your charity. Now, my colleague Kat has just spoken about a lot of the financial things that you need to be considering, right from assessing cash flows and looking at your funds and whether there's any restricted funds that perhaps you could go back to the donor and perhaps get made more flexible for your needs currently. But there's lots of other things that you should consider as well. The fundamental thing is to make sure, again, that you are showing good governance, and this means documenting it as much as possible whenever you're making these decisions. So when you, as a board of trustees, hold a virtual meeting, you need to be reviewing the charity's current position, also the short-term, medium-term, long-term. It's probably very difficult at the moment to balance the short-term needs of a charity, but also be trying to plan for what's going to happen when we get out of these restrictions, and what will the charity have to do to recoup some of the money that it's spending now and to rebuild its relationship with its beneficiaries and other stakeholders, things like that. You definitely need to check the scope of your charitable objects if you're thinking about altering what you do in any way currently. I know there's some charities who want to respond to the coronavirus pandemic and perhaps do something to try and help. Now, if your charity is already within a sector, that means it's something that you would do already, that's great. But if your charity sector is a bit different to, say, health, welfare, or education, it may be that you can't actually use your charitable funds for a purpose to do with the coronavirus straight away. You need to be very careful that whatever you do with the charitable money is within the objects of your charity. You can change the objects of your charity, but that isn't always straightforward. For example, if you're a limited company or a CIO, that would be a regulated change to your governing documents, and you'd have to go to the Charity Commission to apply for that permission. If I move on to the next slide, briefly. So I've probably said it lots already, but the key thing is good governance. As always, and this hasn't changed, as trustees, you need to have these things in the forefront of your mind. You should always be acting in the interests of the charity and its beneficiaries. You need to be protecting and safeguarding the assets of the charity. There are lots of different examples, but just springing to mind, I know I've got a charity client whose premises are closed currently. Well, just because they're closed doesn't mean that the building still needs to be safeguarded, it needs to be looked after, and it's still the trustee's responsibility to make sure that happens. And trustees should also be acting with reasonable care and skill with whatever they do. And just going back to the point that Kat raised earlier, for example, if you're looking at your investment portfolio at the moment and wondering whether you need to make changes to it or not, you need to act with reasonable care and skill. But if you know that your board of trustees lacks a particular skill, you need to, as a board of trustees, seek some professional advice to make sure that you're acting responsibly in the best interest of the charity. So I'll just end the slideshow there a second and hand back to Adam.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, yeah, so it's some really important stuff there, I think, just to ensure that as we're all responding to COVID-19 in our own ways, just to make sure that we're not falling foul of any of the government's requirements. I think that's really important to keep in mind. So if that sort of prompted any of you to think of sort of circumstances you've got in your own organisations, and please feel free to be as specific as you wish to be in the questions. Please pop that in the Q&A, and I know that Tom would only be too happy to answer. We have started to have some questions coming through. There was one coming through relating to the sort of easing of lockdown and the impact that has on opening charity shops for staff who are currently being furloughed, and the period of time required to release those staff from furlough. I think that the distinction that's important to make here is that actually bringing people back from furlough on the job retention scheme can actually be quite a straightforward and quite a simple thing to do. There's sometimes a bit of confusion. There's a 3-week period that staff need to be on furlough in order for you to be eligible to claim. Then, depending on specific wording you've used when you're notifying staff around that, actually they can be brought back off furlough as long as they've been on for 3 weeks quite quickly. So hopefully that answers the question. Tom, we've had a question that's come in for you, I think, just around documentation and what's required to keep. So the question's come in from Anushka. Is a trail of emails sufficient as documentation? For example, if we're distributing financial reports for the month, which is then commented on by other trustees.
I think definitely having a paper trail or an email trail is useful as a historical record that can be looked back upon. But there should also be a lead document that ties it all together. So, for example, just like if you had a normal meeting face-to-face with people and the trustees board met, you would have a secretary or someone who is putting together a full set of minutes that can then be approved. I would still want to see that document written. Now, it could be that the document then refers to an appendix of an email trail or various things like that, but you definitely want a key document that can stay on file.
Thanks, Tom. We've got another question come in around bounce back loans and eligibility for charities. So short answer for this is that yes, charities are eligible. There was initially a requirement for more than 50% of income to come from trading. I think this was initially in the early CBILS guidance, which was then carried forward to the bounce back loans. That requirement around eligibility has actually been removed for charities and non-profits. So assuming that charities meet all of the other criteria, then they are eligible for a bounce back loan. Tom, maybe another one for you around AGMs. Are you finding that many charities are postponing their AGMs, or are they finding other ways to go ahead with them?
I think it varies. I've had a couple clients contact me last week. So it probably depends on your year end and whether there's an imminent deadline coming up to hold the AGM that's stated in your governing documents, perhaps. Where you've had the year end has recently finished and you've still got plenty of time, I think a lot of people are just postponing for now and hoping that the social distancing restrictions will lift enough to hold a proper AGM, even if it is somewhat different to previous years, because they want to have that public openness with their AGM. I think it also probably depends as to who are the voting members within the charity. If you've got a charity whose voting members are actually made up of the board of trustees only, well, it would be pretty straightforward to have some sort of virtual meeting of the trustees in a virtual AGM, and they could probably do that. But it does depend on those factors, I think.
I'm going to have to pick this up now because I'm really not sure if this is a genuine question or if I'm being heckled. But Peter's asked me about my wallpaper. Peter, I've had so many people have criticised my choice of wallpaper, and I've really got to be a little bit. I've got to be a little bit careful about how I talk about this because otherwise I run the risk that my wife will hear. But I'm not sure where it's come from, but changing it certainly doesn't seem like an option, despite how many times I've asked. So hopefully that answers your question. Kat, one that's come in, I think you'd be sort of able to support on. You talked about fundraising in some of your remarks and sort of how that's had to change. We've got a question around if you're having to refund ticket sales for an event of some sort. What are the requirements on needing to do that? And I think there was some guidance around whether charities could claim some gift aid if that were to be donated. Could you just talk to that?
Yeah, no problem. It has been announced that if you have received some money towards an event and the event is not going ahead, and the reason is coronavirus related, you have to offer the money back. But if the original purchaser doesn't want the money back, they can gift aid it to the charity. There's no requirement for you to pay the money back to the individual and then them to pay it back to you. This only works if it's a coronavirus related cancellation, and you still do need to get a gift aid declaration, and you're not allowed to give them any benefit at all. You can't give them a ticket to next year's event or anything. It just literally has to be a donation. But HMRC have removed the requirement for you to get the money back to then redonate it to the charity.
Thanks. On a similar vein to sort of tickets and events, we've had another question, I think more talking to the sort of value for money trustee angle of where do trustees stand on paying deposits for mass events that had already been rebooked but are now not likely to go ahead until 2021. Is there anything they should consider before they commit to those sort of events?
I think it's very individual to the charity. It depends on the scale of the deposit in terms of the overall objects of the charity. I mean, if you're putting, say, £20,000 down for a massive event, and that could be better used to support beneficiaries in the next 12 months, then it's probably not a good use of the charity's funds. However, if it's a small deposit in a otherwise healthy charity, I don't see any issue with holding it for 12 months. I think you just need to look at the long-term aims of the charity and the short-term position and just make a decision and make sure you document why you've made that decision.
Thanks, Kat. I'm conscious we've already run to our half an hour, which just goes to show quite how many questions we've had come in. So if happy with all the attendees, we'll happily go for another few minutes. But if there's anything we don't cover, we'll certainly follow up with you afterwards. There was a question about grants and sort of funding available for charities. pots of money that have been made available, and you would have heard a government announcement a little while ago about this sort of 750 million that's divided up into a few different areas, 370 million of which has gone through to the National Lottery, which is open for applications now. So 370 million pounds with the National Lottery, 360 million is being distributed directly from government to charities that are really on the sort of front line of the response, who could have otherwise have been forgotten, sort of hospices, victims charities, those involved with supporting vulnerable children. And then 20 million has gone to the National Emergencies Trust, who've then onwardsly distributed that to community foundations. Now, I've heard of some charities that have been able to access that through Devon, the Devon Community Foundation and Somerset Community Foundation, and have found the application process really straightforward. So I think out of all of them, the grants that are being distributed by the community foundations is certainly something for you all to consider. See if we can take a couple more. Tom, I think you might have already covered this. Can a video recording be used to replace written minutes?
Yeah, it's sort of similar to the other question, but again, I would say it's fine if you want to record a meeting, that's fine, but there should also be some sort of transcript document, so that there's a proper paper document to be put on file for later use. I don't think you should replace a proper good old-fashioned piece of paper with a video. So,
thanks. And then Kat, we've got one around sort of easing of lockdown. So there's going to be an impact on some fundraising for some time to come. We've talked about mass events. I also know there's likely to be an impact around street collections and social distancing. Are there any other actions that trustees should be thinking about, or indeed management should be thinking about, around how they mitigate the impact on fundraising for some time to come?
I think a lot of it does go back to looking at your budgeting, looking at what you're expecting to come in, and making sure that, yes, your fundraising income won't be coming in the same way that it has been. Although I have seen many charities coming up with new and innovative, can't say that word today, ways to fundraise. And I would recommend that you get thinking. There are new ways to make money, which people haven't been thinking of before, because we stuck to the older ways. But it does go back to looking at the budgeting, looking at the areas where you think maybe you can cut costs, looking at the areas where you might see another charity is doing something one way, and you think, oh, I could do that. So it is just kind of looking at your budget and thinking outside of the box.
Thanks very much, Kat. We've had a question on local authority discretionary funding that's come in from Anita. Anita, I'm hoping that between Kat and I, we answered that earlier on. If we didn't, or if anyone else has got any questions, please feel free to send them into events@thomaswestcott.co.uk, and we'll certainly come back to you on those. I know we've had questions in today from Charlotte, from Anushka, and from Charles that we've not got round to. I've got those, I've captured those, and between us, we'll come back to you on those shortly. Clearly, this is a rapidly evolving piece, and as things develop, we'd certainly hope to be able to share some more with you. So keep your eyes peeled for further charity webinars over the coming weeks. And we've also got another webinar that's worth noting tomorrow at 2 p.m. being held by our managing partner, Shona Godefroy, and also John Dunkley of Woollands, thinking a little bit about what does life after lockdown look like? What are some of the key considerations you should be aware of, particularly from an employment perspective? So for that event and for all other events, you go to thomaswestcott.co.uk/events. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.